Hey guys, welcome back to another video about knife stuff and things. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Bob Lum Chinese folder that Spyderco produced. And again, it was designed by the late Bob Lum. This version is obviously the, it's the VG10 with the quote-unquote carbon fiber. And yeah, so let's get to it. So let's start out with the specs. I like to get them out of the way. Whenever I hear people talk about specs in a video, it really doesn't mean anything without having the knife in hand. So get them out of the way, and then I'm going to try to help convey what this knife actually feels like to own and to carry, and try to help you have that experience so you can see if it's something that you might be interested in at some point. And you know, this knife for me was a surprise, and it was a pleasant surprise. I actually received this one in a trade for a watch or something on the knife forums. I don't even remember what. I thought, what the hell, I'll give it a try. So, specs. Overall length, 7.2 inches about. Blade length, 3.16. Cutting edge, 2.88. Blade thickness, 0.125. Obviously the steel is VG10, as I mentioned. It's a reverse drop point, flat grind, satin finish, plain edge, no serrations, because God knows I hate serrations for my EDC knives. I don't actually have any with serrations, but that's neither here nor there. Handle material, they call it carbon fiber, although it's not your standard carbon fiber. I suppose that the process is kind of the same, but this isn't your standard weave. This is a pattern called Nishijin, if I'm not butchering the Japanese on that, but hopefully this will give you a decent close-up, but it's very beautiful. Really interesting material. I'm not quite sure how Spyderco makes it, but we'll talk about a little bit about the history of Nishijin. Anyways, moving on. Obviously it has the Spyderco deployment method, and the carry on this one is tip up or tip down right hand only, left hand side, nothing there. Sorry lefties, you guys get screwed pretty often, but I'm not a lefty, so good for me. Now, obviously designer Bob Lum, the late Bob Lum, kind of a legend in the knife community. I know he had a lot of influences in I think the martial arts and the Eastern philosophies and studies, and so obviously when Spyderco is looking to produce an ethnic knife, and they're thinking, I don't know if they think region or they just look for good designs, but this is part of their ethnic series, and this is a Chinese folder. So this knife, when you look at it, it looks, if you're looking at a picture of it, you think, you know, that's probably pretty damn uncomfortable. It's kind of got a weird shape, definitely not within the design elements we see on all of our modern folders, which kind of take more of a tactical role. And I suppose you could push this into a tactical role if your life depended on it, but in reality that's certainly not what it's designed for. Anyhow, so in hand it's surprisingly comfortable. I mean, you know, it kind of tapers down and gets thinner towards the distal end there, and it fits in your hand quite nicely. Even though there's no jimping, these edges are not super rounded. There's no choil or finger guard there. I mean, there's really no place for your hand to really lock in and feel secure, you know, with, again, going back to our more modern tactical designs, but it's very comfortable in hand, and again, that's a surprise. You might find a hot spot right here on these two liners underneath, but in reality, you're not going to find a hot spot on a knife unless you're hard using it and really cutting the crap out of something, and this knife was definitely not intended for that use. This is not a hard use knife. This is more along the lines of a gentleman's folder, ethnic knife. It's a very interesting design. Might even function well as a conversation piece. There's this slight swedge that comes down from the top, adds a little bit of depth. Doesn't really do anything, I don't think, aside from obviously the aesthetics. But anyhow, has a liner lock, and it's kind of a thin liner lock. It's you know, thinner than you'd expect, but it's surprisingly sturdy, and that's a crappy deployment. But this thing deploys quite fast. It feels like the distance that you have to travel from the closed to the open position due to this kind of rounded shape is less than normal. I don't know if that if you quite understand what I'm saying there, but it deploys very fast. It's very smooth. Even though the liner is quite thin, it's actually very sturdy. I mean, it's very, very sturdy. It's quite surprising. I've been pleasantly surprised with this knife in a lot of aspects, and carries very well due to the thinness factor of the handle. It does have a fairly, well, I wouldn't call that a deep carry. In fact, it's not a deep carry, but what I like about this knife is, or at least the pocket clip, while we're talking about that, is the handles are quite slippery. So if you had to reach into your if this had a deep carry pocket clip and you had to reach in there and try to find traction on something, it'd be a pain in the ass to pull out. But with the pocket clip the way it is in these 3 screws, I often find that when I go to pull it out, I grab these screws and it functions very well as a nice traction point to extract the knife from my pocket. So I like where the pocket clip is for that reason, because of the slipperiness of the handles. This Nishijin, however you say it, this actually functions well to extract. So pretty cool. Now the pocket clip, it's obviously one of the Spyderco painted black. I don't like these. They certainly get beat up over time. They don't hold well. I do prefer the kind of black chrome clips like you find on the Domino, the Gale Bradley, the Navaja. I think the Butch Valton has one as well, but I definitely prefer these. These hold up very, very well. Case in point, Endura 4 Emerson Wave. This is my hard use kind of beater knife. This thing is a trooper, and as you can see, takes on a lot of wear. And perhaps some of you guys like the worn look. You know, it's like scars. They're kind of badges of honor, but I don't know. On a knife this attractive, I'm just not a fan of the painted clips for the most part, because this starts looking crappy. The handle and the blade still look perfect, and it's just distracting from the overall presentation, I feel. I wish they'd do away with the painted black clips, but what can you do, right? Especially trying to keep the price points in mind. So anyways, back to the ergonomics. Yeah, it feels good in hand. You know, for any tasks that you're doing with this knife, which, sorry for the fingerprints there, which should be very light EDC type stuff, I think it'll function well. The ergonomics will be just fine. If you try to force this into a role that it was not intended for, you might find hot spots, you might be uncomfortable, you might force a failure on this lock, but you'd have to be doing something pretty hard use or pretty stupid. So you do something stupid, cut yourself, no one feels bad for you, except for the insurance company, because they have to pay for the cut. Anyways, so obviously this is a Chinese influenced design. Now let's talk about the ironies of that. This knife was produced in Japan, as is evident by the VG10, Seiki City, Japan. So the Chinese and the Japanese have been well, they haven't been friends for a very, very long time. Looking back to their history, a lot of one person invading the other and killings and so on and so forth. So I have friends who are Chinese and they're still not fond of the Japanese, and vice versa, I'm sure. So Chinese design knife produced in Japan using Nishijin, which was developed or popularized about 1200 years ago in the Kyoto region. And Nishijin is quintessential Japanese. What it is they take a lot of little tiny pieces of yarn and they overlay them or weave them together in a very intricate and painstaking pattern. Or at least that was the origins of Nishijin. So Nishijin, or this type of pattern, is as quintessential Japanese as you can possibly get. I mean, it's like sushi. Although I'm sure sushi isn't as quintessential as most Americans make it out to be. So, quintessential Japanese cultural icon on a knife that's produced in Japan using a very Japanese-only steel that is a Chinese-produced knife. So, I don't know if you can see the ironies there, but I do. I kind of laughed a little. Maybe you will too. But anyways, definitely two cultures who haven't gotten along for a lot of history, and you have elements of both in here, which does make it a very Asian design, I suppose, for the ethnic series, and I'm sure that Sal isn't a stickler for the cultural elements. Anyways, So again, feels good in hand. Very interesting piece, conversation starter. The handles are slippery-ish, but again, with the roll that this knife is intended for, you shouldn't find that to be a problem. It's pretty cool. Deploys well, solid lockup, very smooth. The liners, or it uses a phosphor bronze washer on both sides, and the interesting thing is here on the, I guess you call it the display side, the bronze washer is so thin that initially I thought that it was missing. I mean, I have never seen a phosphor bronze washer that thin before. I had to take the knife apart because I got it in a trade. I wasn't sure if I got screwed and the guy took it apart and lost pieces or something. I was a little peeved at first until I took it apart and realized there is in fact a liner. I'm sorry, I keep saying a liner. There is a phosphor a phosphor bronze washer on this side, and on this side there's a little bit thicker one, and it's easier to see, although the camera's probably not going to pick it up. So again, really interesting knife, really cool. It fits really well in the pocket, works well with slacks if you're wearing slacks. Really interesting piece, non-threatening, I would think. I can't really deploy well underneath the camera, but fires very well. Spidey flick, I don't remember if I can do it with this knife or not. Anyways, I think you should give it a try. You know, if one comes up in a trade, or you see one for a good price, give it a shot, see what happens. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, as I was. And again, it's kind of a nice breakaway from the, you know, overly tactical knives that we have. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just kind of the style and what's being produced now. But yeah. Any questions, comments, throw them down below. Hopefully I covered everything, or at least something of interest. And yeah, have a good one, guys.